All right, everybody, welcome back to another Unreal Engine Ask a Dev tutorial. Today we're going to be doing yet again another live tutorial. These sometimes go well and they sometimes don't because they're live. As always, thank you for hopping in. For those of you that are watching live, I really appreciate you all being here to help make sure that I have simple things done like audio on and so on. All of our streams are recorded. They're all in the live section available in the channel, so you can always go back and check those out if you missed one. Didn't say it yet, I don't think. My name's Kevin. And before we get started, a couple quick things. Big shout outs to Naroda, Chap 5. There were a couple other people who've been helping so much in Discord that I wanted to shout out and thanks. And I've just blanked on their names. If I get a chance, I'll try to remember those in a minute. Also, wanted to say thank you to Morgan S. and Wes B. for helping support the channel and Patreon. It really is how we keep going, so I very much appreciate your support there, as well as everybody else for just being here, being part of the community, and helping spread the word about what we're doing. I saw that, I believe it was Off the Rails and Specta are here. Welcome to the stream. Pralade and Shreyash, welcome to the stream. Today, we are going to be we're going to continue our journey in persistence, data persistence and saving the game. And we're going to do a little bit of a part 2 to our JSON stream. Reason being is, all right, Milan from the Czech Republic, welcome. We're going to be kind of going down the rabbit hole a little bit. Let's go down the rabbit hole a little bit about how fun the data management can be. We're going to do that by setting up some weapons and some items and some other things to go into our JSON file. And then we're going to probably at that point wrap that up, and then we'll move on to other means of saving our data as we go. So with that, we're definitely going to be I'm definitely going to be using my notes today. This was a surreal challenge to figure out. So with that, let's hop in. But before we get going too much on our actual stream, there's one thing I did want to discuss that we talked a little bit about last time. Because we're saving data, there was a really good question about the game instance, the game mode, and the game state last time. So I wanted to revisit this on the spot. I don't think I did a great job of explaining how all this stuff works and comes together. I'm going to leave this little table up to look at. I think this is a pretty good summary, but I just wanted to say a good way to think about this is the game instance is kind of like the memory bank, the overall like place that's always there. It holds all your progress, settings, everything. The game mode, you can think of the game mode as the referee for a specific match. Right? That's the one that's like running all the rules and when things happen, etc. And you can think of the game state as like the scoreboard, storing information about what's happening right now, etc. like that. So I thought this was a cool little table. You can always come back and freeze it. I actually use a lot of different tools to help coalesce this data. And I try, you all know this if you're part of the community. We've been working a lot with AI and things like that. This table I thought was a really great output from a couple of my AI searches, and I thought it was a really cool summary to be able to reference. And there's a couple key things in here that I thought were really cool, as far as even things like replication, right? So it's a quick little reference for you. Game instance is not replicated. It turns out there's a copy of that on everybody's machine. Game state and mode are replicated. So it's a cool little table. Just wanted to share that with you, so we had that going before we get in. Now, back to Unreal and saving our data. So what are we going to be doing today? If you recall, where we were at last week, let me find it. Oh, it's not there. Let's just open a file explorer then. So we had gotten to the point where we could save and load our game. And if we edit this, if we open this with Notepad++, you can see we had created a very simple JSON file. But it wasn't really representative of everything that was going on in a game, or the fun or challenges of the data structure. So today, let's go ahead and do some things like add some weapons. Now, I'm going to talk through some of the shortcuts I'm taking as we add these weapons to our character, but we're basically going to just be adding these as variables. We're not going to be building entire weapon components and stuff like that. This is about the persistence and the data. It's not about building an entire weapon and itemization system right now. So, what does everybody think about that? Should we get going? Okay. I'm going to take the silence as a yes. So, there's a couple things we're going to need in as we're storing our information. So we're going to need, much like we did last week, if you all recall, we created this struct. The struct has our player name, health, and shield. We're going to need another struct. And we're going to need another struct for our weapons. And we're going to need another struct for our items. Now, once again, in the middle of a live stream, I've decided I'm going to make a change versus what my notes were. So this is always going to go fun. It's just the way it goes. But before we do that, in order for us to be able to make a struct that includes our weapons, we do need a weapon. So I'm going to create a weapon real quick here, and we're not going to do anything with this. And let's just create this an actor. This is going to be our BP. We're going to call this our weapon base. And I just want you all to visualize that this has all of the cool weapon stuff in it. It has our visuals. It has everything that our weapons need to do, whatever that happens to be. So we're not going to do anything with it. I am just going to save it so that we have it. And then I'm going to create one more BP. Let's just duplicate this one. And we're going to call this our item base. BP item base. And you'll see why we need these two in a second, because we're going to include these in our struct. All right. Thomas, welcome to the stream. Now, in order to store a bunch of weapon data and item data, we need a struct for that. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's create a new blueprint structure, and this is going to be struct, and this is going to be, let's call this weapon data. Okay, and then we're going to create another struct, and this struct is going to be struct item data. Okay, now let's get to work on both of these. Stock these. Dock these. Okay, and we'll save both of them, just so we have them. Okay, so what kinds of things do we want to store for our weapon data? Hopefully you all are thinking about things like, the weapon name, for example. Let me bring up just a couple of things that I had done previously. So I've got them because there were some key gotchas in there that I want to make sure I recreate. All right, so for our weapon data, this first one, let's just go ahead and keep it simple. We're going to go name. All right, and this is going to be a string. And then we're going to add another one, and this is going to be the class. This is why we created our blueprints, and we want this to be a BP. We're in the weapons, right? Yeah, this is going to be weapon data, weapon base. Now, the weapon base that we're going to store, we're not going to store an object reference. We can't store something that's not created and doesn't persist across things. So we're just going to store a reference to the class in this case. That way we know what class the weapon system will need to spawn if it needs to do it. I'm not going to worry too much about the logistics, because remember, this is all about storing the data, not the management of the weapons themselves. This is going to be our damage that it does, for example. Maybe it has a damage molt, and let's do maybe durability. And then I'll check the chat to see if you all had any good ones to add to our weapon data. Nope, everybody's just ready. Okay, now, but these are not classes, okay? We're going to change this to a float. We'll change this to a float. So our damage and durability are, this might be the lifetime. This is how much damage it does. That's good enough for what we need in order to illustrate our data management. Now, the items are going to be pretty similar. We got a couple of differences here. Let's just go ahead and the first field, let's go name. Anybody have any good stuff to store with our items? Make this a string. Maybe we have a level, for example. And we'll make that level, that could be an integer. We don't need to have. Now, what you decide to make these is going to largely depend on your progression systems and everything that goes into your game that you're making. So Obviously, feel free to change these. The effect, we're just gonna, this is like, what does it do? Let's make this a string. And maybe we also need the class here too, so that we can make sure we restore the class. Now this one is going to be a BP item base class reference. All right, so we have all the structs we need in order to get going. Now, we need our player to have a bunch of items and weapons for us to work with so that we can illustrate this example. Rather than creating, weapon management components, we're just going to add a couple of variables. So let's just add 2 variables. The first one we're going to add is going to be weapons, and the second one is going to be items. Okay, and our weapons, we're going to change the type to be struct weapon data. And for the items, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to change it to be struct item data. Okay, now let's make up some cool weapons. First, we're going to have to compile everything. And we do want these weapons. This is where we get into the fun. We're not just going to store one. We're going to store, and this is where, you already should be thinking, well, you have the weapons that are in your backpack. Those are weapons. And then you have the equipped weapon. So we would probably want to store the equipped weapon too, etc. Anyways, you can start thinking about the rabbit hole. But the ones that are in our backpack that are part of our inventory, that's going to be an array because we can have more than one. Same thing for our items. So let's just make sure we make this an array. And part of the reason we're doing this as an array is we want to make sure that we illustrate some of the fun challenges of working with multi-tiered data structures, not only in JSON, but even future us for these other things. So for our weapons, let's just add 3 weapons. Let's go 1, 2, 3. Who's got cool weapons? He's got a sword. Okay, so let's call that a sword. For now, it's just going to be a weapon base. I'm not going to worry about it. Let's just say it does 50 damage, and it's super durable. Okay, we got a bow. Not a boy, we got a bow. Why can't I spell bow? B-O-W, thank you. Bow, weapon base, damage. Bow maybe it does 25 damage, and it's not quite as durable. Let's go 70. And then we have a staff. Sanjia Gwen, we could do a 3-sectional staff, but we'll just do a staff. And then that's also going to be a weapon base. Now, we would probably, if there was a staff blueprint, we would use that instead, but for now we're not going to make all those. The staff does do more damage than the bow, but it's also not as durable as the bow. Let's just go with those stats. Okay, so those are our weapon stats. Everybody with me? We're making the data. So now let's take a look at our items. And for our items, what we're going to do is the exact same thing. We're going to create a couple of just starter items for us to work with. So let's just do a couple simple ones. 1, 2, 3. We'll do 3 again. That'll be enough. And what we're going to specify is all of these things. So let's just call this a health potion, for example. And let's say level 10. And what does it do? It heals healing X level, I don't know. And the class is going to be our item class. It would be an actual potion of some kind, but in this case we haven't made them, so you get the idea. We're going to have let's have a mana crystal, for example. Crystal level 2 restores mana restore. Maybe we use this to figure out what it does. You get the general idea. And then finally, we're going to do, what did I do? Let's do like boots of swiftness, because everybody has that, right? Swiftness, level 10, movement speed, molt, for example. I don't know. And this is going to be an item. There's lots of things about this that you may have to change depending on what you're doing, but once again, the point here is to start to show how some of this layered data works. So let's compile and save this. Our third person character now has weapons and items for us to work with. So let's start working with those. But before we do that, there's a couple things, just as a quick refresher. Remember, our game instance is where we save our JSON file. Right now we're taking our player data and we're feeding it into our JSON string, which gets loaded and it gets saved to a file. Now we're going to have to change this a fair bit. And what we're going to do is, I think probably, and this is the change that I'm wondering if we don't make this on the fly. You know what? Let's do it the way I'm prepped for, and then we'll come back and clean this up. And I will comment why I want to try a new way here in a second. Okay? So if we go back to our third person character, well, all right, we're getting started on the actual rabbit hole. Is everybody ready to jump in, or does anybody have any questions so far? Ready, good. Okay, cool. So what we need to do with our get player data is we definitely need to return our weapons. Okay, so let's get our weapons, and we're also going to need to return our items. So we're going to get our items. Now, I'm just going to drop this on the return node, and it's going to fill in the variables for me automatically, which is cool. So I have that. Now, when we do this, though, however, when we get our player data, if we go back to our game instance, let's see here, game instance. Yes, you can see here. Hold on a second. Where's our inside of our save point? Inside of our save point, you can see when we overlap our sphere, if it is a save point, we're getting our third person character, just as a quick recap, and then we're getting our player data and we're passing that to the save game data. Now, this is why, Tomas, welcome. Is there any performance difference when using JSON approach compared to the regular saving system? I have not profiled that. That's a really good question. I have not profiled that. To a certain extent, that's why we have asynchronous loads and saves and stuff like that. We talked about that a little bit last time. The difference in when you would use the save object system versus the JSON is pretty different, right? Like the save object system is going to be a little more secure. The JSON system is going to be when you want your users to potentially be able to edit it, quick prototyping, stuff like that. I would have to profile it, so I don't have a good answer for that right now. But if anybody knows, feel free to chime in. Now, what I would potentially want to do, and what we're going to do at the end, is right now, in order for me to pass the weapons in the items, I'm going to have to go to my blueprint interface, and I'm going to have to add weapons and items. That's kind of a bummer. What I'd really like to do is I'd really like to have weapons and items as part of our player data. A single struct that I'm going to pass in. Yeah. Now, the only caveat, Warren's got a good comment there as far as JSON can get slow if it's not in the memory and needs to be parsed. My only caveat as far as file sizes is if you are tracking like an RTS where you're tracking every single asset in the world, its state, its build state, its life, the damage, everything that's going on, the data sets can get quite large actually. All right, so what we're going to have to do now is we're going to have to update our save data blueprint interface to accept our weapons and our items. So if we bring back our details panel, okay, we're going to have to add two variables. This is the thing that I wasn't super excited about. I thought it would be cool if we went ahead and did this all as a single struct, and we'll go ahead and do this in the end, but for right now, just because struct weapon data as an array. This is the way I did it when I was getting ready, when prepping, and I don't want to move too many things in this because this is a semi-precarious thing where what we have is compile and save. The way this all comes together as we're dealing with these nested structures in the JSON objects, it took me a long time to figure out. So hopefully, not only are we learning about JSON, we are also learning about I'm hopefully helping save you time, saving the pain and the time I went through to figure out how these JSON objects work. Way too satisfying. And real quick, a JSON file, just as a quick recap from our last class, is a text file that has a specific format with elements in it, and they're usually done in pairs, like name is Kevin, health is 100, shield. This is a very basic JSON file, for example, but it's basically a text file. It's human readable, and it has a bunch of key value pairs in it that allow you to do really cool stuff with data. Okay, so since we updated our Blueprint interface, and if you don't know what a Blueprint interface is, like I mentioned before, it's a messaging system. We have a whole tutorial on that. I would highly recommend checking out the Blueprint Interface Demystified tutorial if you're not familiar with Blueprint interfaces. But we've updated our save game data interface, so now it understands how to send weapons and items as part of the message. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and compile this and save this. So at this point, when we get our player data and we go to save the game, we're passing this stuff in. However, on the flip side, in our game instance, now we have to update our game instance. And so you can see this like knock-on effect. Now each one of these things is going to have these extra fields. It would be a whole lot nicer if this was just a single struct and I passed it in. So if we created one more struct, and in that struct there was player info and then weapons and items, and that whole struct was called player data, for example. That's what we'll do at the end to see how much that messes us up. But in the meantime, let's just continue down this fun thing. And this is one of those things that you learn as you go, and you're going to iterate as you go. So let's call this weapons. We'll call this items. How's audio doing today, everybody? This is going to be our weapon struct. And this is an array. And this is going to be our items struct. Item struct. And this is also an array. We'll go ahead and compile and save. As a quick reminder, since I didn't say it at the beginning, if I get a blue screen of death, I will be back. And just give me a second, the stream will come back. All right, so weapons and items are just going to plug straight into our save game. Finally, now we can start to do some work. Okay. So this is where this gets tricky. All right, I'm going to make a lot of space because this is where the rabbit hole begins. All right, right now, we're taking our player data, we're converting it into a JSON string, we're loading that string, and we're saving the JSON2 file. That is not going to work for arrays. All right, and here's an example of what I'm talking about. If we take this and we convert this struct to a JSON string, okay, and we save that into our file instead, just skip the player data for right now, and then you're thinking, we can stack them. Let's just see if our weapons show up in our JSON file when we walk over it, okay? So this was save. So if we escape out and we go back to our player data and we open this inside of Notepad++, it's going to prompt me reload. Yes, nothing. It doesn't know how to parse an array of structs. It doesn't know how to do it. So we got to help it, which means we have to do a lot of work, okay? And basically, you might have initially started with this, and then you might have appended this string to this string. None of that works, okay? And so I'm hopefully going to help save you a bunch of time with that. We're not doing that. That is not what we're doing. We are going to be stacking JSON objects, and that's where this comes in. So here's what we're going to do. Inside of our game instance, I'm going to add two variables. This is going to be our weapon, JSON, OBJs, and then we're going to go ahead and call we're going to set this variable type to JSON object, and I'm going to make it an array, okay? And then we're going to create another one of these, and this is going to be our items. It took me forever to figure this out, you all. And maybe some of you are like, oh yeah, that's pretty straightforward. I would have done that in the first place, but not for me. JSON objects. Okay, so we have our weapons and we have our items. Now, what we need is, let's make one more. We're going to make one that is the out JSON object. Or let's call it the final JSON, just so it's clear for you guys. OBJT object. Now this one is not going to be an array. It is just going to be a single one. Okay, so what we're going to do is we are going to start our save game. We're going to construct a JSON string, and we're going to load the JSON string, load JSON from string, and then what we're going to do, unlike what we did before, is we're going to set our final JSON object. Okay, we're going to set our final JSON object. Oh, I hate it when I do that. We're not going to use Visual Studio. Double click. Nerves, y'all. Double click. All right, so we're going to set our JSON object. Okay, and with this, eventually what we're finally going to do is we are going to save this JSON object to file. So there's going to be a whole bunch of stuff that happens in here with our weapons, and eventually we're going to save this JSON object to file. So the JSON object that we're going to save to file is going to be final, and just for now, for testing, to make sure we get our player save back, we're just going to plug this in. So taking player data, putting in the JSON object, storing it as a variable, and outputting that. This should get us back to the point where we have our player data. Yes, reload. Yep, there we go. Name, health, shield. Okay, which is great. Now we got to start with our arrays. And this is going to go so fast. Y'all can be like, wow, why did this take you so long, Kevin? Okay, let's get our weapon JSONs. All right, and what we're going to do is for each, no. Yeah, we're going to need that in a minute. But first, let's get this. We're going to go through for each of our weapons that is passed in first. Okay, and for each of these, we are going to take it and we are going to, zoom in a little bit, even though the font's big, we're going to convert this to a JSON string. Okay, and then once we've done converting it to a JSON string, we're going to load JSON from string. So let's load JSON from string. And that is going to give us a JSON object. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take our weapon objects and we're going to go ahead and add this to it. So what I found was if we stack these JSON objects, Unreal seems to understand this. Okay, which is cool. Took a lot of like Velociraptor testing the fences type stuff to figure this out. Because I'm trying to do this without using code, and this is kind of a cool way to do it. So what we're going to do is we're going to store all of our weapons in this weapon JSON object array. Okay. Then what we're going to do is rather than going to the end, we're going to take this and we're going to come down here. Okay. And actually, I'll just move this over to make it clear. Let's just move this over. So we're going to go through each of those. Do a quick little formatting here so it looks good. So this is going to stack. We have one final JSON object, and then we're going to stack our weapons in this weapon JSON objects. So we have a stack of them. Now, what we're going to do with that stack is when this is done, we are going to take our final JSON object, and we are going to set a field. Now, what do you think we should call the field for our array of weapons? How about weapons? We'll just call it weapons. Okay, so this field name is going to be weapons. This is our array of current weapons. So this is where we're getting into being able to stack this stuff. Now, when this is complete, we're going to take our final JSON object and we're going to add a new field to it called weapons. And the value that we are going to give that weapons is our weapon objects array. Now you'll notice that this pin for set field is a wildcard. It doesn't know what it is. It doesn't know what it is until you connect it, which isn't super obvious. So if we go from the pin to the array, this will then convert this, and this will now store a stack of weapons JSON objects. So if we now take this set field and we just connect out to our save, we should be now, when we look at our final file or our JSON file after we do a save, we should have, theoretically, if demos ever go well, please, we should have we should have our names, and we should have an array of weapons. Now, we do, which is cool. But it's really hard to read. So as with, everything we do, always trying to push it, here's what we're going to do. We're going to ask Grok to help us format this. Okay, so this is Grok 3. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to say, please format this JSON so I can read it. Okay. New line, paste. And the reason I'm doing this is because anytime I tried to put in carriage returns or new lines into the actual JSON string files, the stuff I got back was bogus. So I was looking for a way to format the stuff so that I could troubleshoot and test and make sure that that actually worked. Now, Grok is definitely taking its sweet time. Here's the original, and then here's what it spits out for us. So which is cool. So if we look at this, we have our name, our classes. Let's scroll down a little bit. So I can now, without having to go through and press return and all this kind of stuff, it formatted it for me so I can see, like I have an open swirly brace and a close. I have my name, health, shield. These are my fields. I have a weapons field that is an array, and it has 1, 2, 3 items in it, and then I have the close of the array. So that's really cool. So we have successfully created a legit JSON file, even though it's flat formatted. And I was just using Grok as part of the setup to troubleshoot and test so that I didn't have to do the formatting. Okay, so if we go back to our game instance, I'm going to ask you all if you have any questions so far while I get a quick drink. There's a giant bottle of sparkling water. And what we're going to do, if there are no questions, is we're going to do the same thing for items. So let me double check. All right. Looks like Spectre PBM is good. Milan is all right. All right, cool. So we just need to do the exact same thing we just did, where we're taking a stack of JSON objects. And this was the clutch key thing. Once I figured out you could stack JSON objects and set the fields, this basically gives you what you need in order to be able to get all of those fields to show up within your JSON file. So let's move this down because this is going to be our final step. And we're going to do another one of these. Well, except this time we're going to work with our items. So let's go through for each one. For each one, we have a bunch of items. Makes sense. So for each one, we're going to go ahead, we're going to convert it. Let's convert it to a JSON string. And then once we've done that conversion, we're going to take that string. We're going to load up our JSON from the string. This creates an object for us. And this time we're going to store that in our items. Now, I kind of don't like the way I've named these variables personally. It's very hard to read. So I'm probably going to change the name of these. I didn't call these names when I was going through the many sleepless nights trying to figure this out. We take this and we go add to it. How can we make this more readable? Let's do this. Let's just call these weapon OBJs. Weapon OBJs. Maybe. And item OBJs. So it's easier to read. Oh, that's much easier on the eyes. You can call the stuff whatever you want. I actually recommend whatever your team or project is set up for best practices. So we now have a stack of items. Now, just like we did with our setting a field for our weapons, we're going to do the exact same thing. So inside of here, what we're going to do is we're going to take our final JSON object again, which now has our player data and it now has a field for weapons, we're going to add, we're going to set a field in here. And the field name we're going to use is, let's use items. Makes sense? Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to call this items. And what we're going to plug into items is our items OBJs. And what this does is it creates another array of items within our JSON file. Now, you can see how this is starting to daisy chain. We got to loop through the stuff. We got to create a stack. Then once we create the stack, we got to set the field. And you can imagine your items have their own stats. So there was, what you would have to do is you would have to have another array within your items that stacks those stats as well. So theoretically, with what we've done right now, we should be able to walk over that. And if we go back to our JSON, did we get a new JSON file? We did. We can scroll to the end quickly to see if we got stuff. Do we have items in here? Yep, we have a movement speed mole. I can't read it. Let's go back to Grok and let's here's a new one. Maybe Grok will move a little bit faster for us today. And while that's thinking, we'll come back and we'll go to here. Okay, cool. So now that we have all that, and we're pretty confident that our JSON file is valid. That's what Grok's helping us with. And I love using AI, you all, to do all these things. Formatting, you know, I have code that'll write a bunch of code that prints out a bunch of stuff, and I'll ask AI to format it for me. For example, hey, could you format this into a you know, a bunch of email addresses? Like there's so many different ways that I use AI for formatting. Now, what we need to do though is, now that we're saving our game, we kind of need to do the same thing with the load game. All right, so let's do that. The load game is going to be a little bit different, because what we need to do is we're going to go through, we're going to get our field names. Okay, so here's our load, right? And right now, if we, actually, I don't even know what happens if we go over our load. It prints out, okay, look at that. It prints out name, health, shield, weapons, and items, but no weapons or items show up. That's because we now have to go through, and we have to figure out is this field a weapons or items? Is it an array? And if it is, we have to loop through it differently. And this is why the rabbit hole keeps going, because, and this is why the saving is, well, once you figure out the JSON stacking in this case, the saving is not the fun part. The saving is, or the fun part of saving, hold on, let me rephrase that. Saving, when you're dealing with persistent data, is not the fun part. The fun part is data structures and organization. Because if you do it wrong, and by the way, I want to use that very reservedly, wrong is caveated. The first time you do something is not wrong, it's just the first time you've done it. And so you're going to learn a lot from that. So the first time you do it, you're probably not going to be, probably not going to be the most efficient way. But as you go through, you'll learn that how you format this data makes a big difference. So what we're going to do is we're going to check. We need to check when we get this field. Let's check to see if this is equal to weapons, for example. So is this field a weapons field? And if it's true, by the way, this is a triple equal sign, just so you know. There's different kinds of equal signs available. You can do equal, you can do triple equal, but this equal is for math. Triple equal is for string, and you'll notice that's under the string, and that's kind of how you know there. Just as a heads up, I'm going to put a branch node in here. That's hold B and left click to do that. So if this is weapons, we're going to do something differently. Okay. And if not, we're going to go ahead and print false. Okay. And I'm going to change this. We're going to go 20 seconds so we have time to read all this stuff. All right. So if this is weapons, then we're going to assume that this is an array now. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to get the field. And we're going to get the field from our JSON object here. Let's see, hold on, we got the field. Yeah, so we're going to get the field. And the field we're going to get is the one that we passed in. Actually, this is going to go over here. True. Okay. And what that's going to return is that's going to return a JSON object, right? And the value is going to be an array of elements. So in this particular case, what I need to do is I need to do a for loop. I'm going to do a for loop here for each loop. And you'll notice we have this wildcard problem again. Our array, we can't connect in. So if we go backwards, we can connect this up. So now this is an array, but it still doesn't know what type it is. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that, let's see here, field name, array element. We're going to get the field from, hold on, I gotta make sure I'm doing this right. We're going to get the field names. Sorry, this is not what we want. We want this to be get field names. So from our, let's get field names. Okay. So if that's true, we're going to get all of our field names. Okay. And then for each of those, wait a minute. Nope, I was right. I was right the first time, y'all. Okay. We do need this though. We're going to need this here in a second. Okay, let's go back. We're going to bring back our getting the field. Get the field. And the string is going to be this string. And with that field, we're going to go through and we're going to do a for each loop. For each loop. So for each weapon in the array, we're going to get the field names. So this field names is actually going to connect in here. Now you notice the minute I do that, this pen, this is why the whole backwards thing sometimes hurts my brain. The pen updates. So it now knows that it's going through a for loop of type JSON objects. And then when we connect this array in, it's going to know that this is now an array of these JSON objects. And so for each of these field names, what we're going to do is we are going to get the field from this one. So now we can get the field from each of our elements. And the name of the field is this guy. And then what we're going to do is we're going to just print it for now. So let's take and do, this is our name. And I'm going to append a string, two strings together. So let's append strings. Almost there, y'all. So if we add another pen to it, let's just go ahead and put a semicolon there. And then the value we're going to be getting is our field name. And with that, we're going to go ahead and print a string. Print string. And we're going to print out our final string. Okay, so let's recap this. When we come through and we open our JSON object, we're going to get our field names. For each one we're going to go through, we're going to get the value. Is that what I want to do? This is too far forward. We want this to be this one. Okay, so for each one of these, we're going through, here, let's go back to Grok for a second. This is why we wanted to print this. So we're coming through here. Okay, first time we come in, our field is name, then we have health, then we have shield, then we have weapons. So with name, we get, for each one, the first one's name, we get the field, then we get the value, that's name. Okay, but in this particular case, if it's weapons, if that's true, we're going to get the field, but the name that we want is off of the for loop. Hold on. I've mucked this up a little bit. This needs to be after the branch. Okay. Let me move the branch, y'all. Weapons. Okay. And what we're going to do is, if it's false, we're going to do what we did before. We're going to print the string. We're going to append it. We're going to get the field name from our field name. So let's at least get our base case done. Okay. So if it's false, we get our JSON object. We still need our object connected in. Okay. And then if it's true, then what we're going to do is we're going to get our JSON object with the field name. I don't like these lines. I'll fix them later. But we're going to use our field name. And then we're going to go through each one of those. And we're going to get our JSON object from that. Then we're going to get the field from that one. And this is the nesting. So this is the nesting that's happening up here. Okay? So theoretically, if we finally got that connected correctly, when we go ahead and we press play, we don't even have to write out our file anymore. We should just be able to walk over it. And we do that. I need to change our print times. Let's change our print time so we have time to read this stuff. Let's go 30 seconds and 30 seconds. And we're going to change, not 2,000 seconds, 30 seconds. And what we're going to do is let's just change our weapons to be like green, for example. So we can see the difference between the weapons and the player data. Okay, great. So our weapons, we have sword, bow, staff. They have their classes, their damages, and their durabilities. And you'll notice we have our name now, our health, our shield, etc., which is great. Okay, so that is totally working. Now, if we wanted to, then this is what I mean by nesting and rabbit holes, because then we have to do the same thing for items. Now, we can cheat this, because this technically will work for our items. So what we can do is, let's see if I can clean up some of these lines a little bit. We can also check to see if this is items, right? And then if the field name is weapon or items, then we're going to go ahead and print out the values in the array. Okay? Now, the only bummer is this will be, they will both be green. Whatever, for the purpose of the demo, that's not important. The rabbit hole is what's important. So if we walk over this, you'll now notice that we also have, in our name fields, we have Boots of Swiftness, we have the Mana Crystal, and we have the Health Potion. And below that, we have all of our weapons. Sword, bow, durability, staff, etc., etc. Okay? So, with that, we're saving using this rabbit hole of if it's this, then we stack it, and then we take that stack and we put it inside of weapons, and then we take the weapons and we stick it inside the actual formal JSON object. Same thing for the loading. When we go through to load, we're going to get our field names. If it's a weapon or an item, then we're going to go ahead and get the field. We're going to get the field names. We're going to do all the stuff. We're going to print it. Now, ultimately, when you're saving and loading persistent data, you're not just going to print it. You're going to do stuff with it. So if it's a weapon, what you're going to do is you're going to either add it to their inventory or equip it. If it's equipped item, same thing. You're going to grant it to the player. That's the reason why we were storing the class, because when you come in here, you want to be able to get the class. And if we look at our nicely printed stuff, you can see that now we have the class of this weapon. And we may actually have wanted to use our soft object reference instead of the actual class reference. That's a possibility. I'd have to double check which one it is. I can't remember off the top of my head which one I use. But we have a nicely formatted nested JSON file structure, JSON format now, which is really cool. So that is the rabbit hole. JP, welcome to the stream. Rusty, yes. Burgess, oh, a whole bunch of people hopped in. Harshal, welcome to the stream. GNC. Welcome to the stream. Vargas. Warren with the hookup on some good JSON wrangling resources. There are actually other plugins that you can use for JSON. I just wanted to show you all how this stacking works with the two that come straight with Unreal Engine 5.5. I think it's all, not only is it cool to understand the rabbit hole, but we've talked about this in the past. Every single thing you learn, the more ways you learn to do it, it increases your vocabulary and your literacy. I would have never thought about this stacked JSON object method if I had not gone through this exercise. So now for future stuff, if I find myself looking at a similar system that uses a similar stacking where we're reusing objects, etc., this is not going to be so foreign to me, which is really cool. So this is all really good. Yep. So using Python, that's true. You can also use Python to do it, which is true. Okay, so with that, we've actually successfully gone through our kind of JSON save and load section. Now, what I wanted to do though is I wanted to kind of turn this a little bit upside down. Let's go ahead and save all. And then let's see if we can go back and remove this whole passing weapons and items in. Okay? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to break a bunch of stuff. So inside, let's go to our third person map and we're going to create a new struct. I'm going to change, we're going to create a new struct, blueprint. This struct is going to be called struct player, and I'm going to call it info. Okay, and then what we're going to do in our info is we're just going to give it three things. Okay, this is going to be player data, and this is going to be a struct player data. And then we're going to make, this is going to be weapon data, and this is going to be weapon data, and that's going to be an array. We're going to do one more, and this is going to be item data. It is worth calling out, this is going to be struct items. Hold on one second. I can't remember who the individual was who shared in one of the comments on one of the YouTube channels. A lot of times when you're messing with these structures, if you've already defined it and you go back and you change the order or the types or anything like that, it can completely like just mess up all of your wiring. It can really confuse it. Unreal can get confused about all these types and what they're doing, etc. So it's that particular individual basically commented they've moved all of their structs definitions into simple C++ in order to get around that. It's worth a call out. Thank you for the tip as always. All right, so we have our struct player info. Now what we're going to do is we're going to change our BPI. And our BPI for save game, if we bring up our details, we're going to get rid of these two. And we're going to change this to the struct player info. Okay, compile and save that. And that's going to break a bunch of stuff. So if we go back to our third person character, we don't need to return these things. So we can get rid of this. Okay, but we do need to make a struct here. And this out player data, actually let's just keep this connected so you can see what happens. If we take this out player data and we change this to a struct, wait, I'm probably holding the wrong thing. Here we go. This is going to be a struct player info that we're returning now. Okay, if we compile that, we've got an error. So we can just compile again. We don't have an error. Now what we need to do is we need to make one of these. So let's make our player info. And we're going to pass in our player data, our weapons, and our item data. Okay. And once we've done that, we need to see where else we broke stuff, because inside of our our save point, this is all broken now too. Let's refresh this node. It just takes the player data, which is cool. So our game instance will now send the player data, although the save game data, we should really call that, rather than save game data, just to be consistent, this should be called save game info now. I would rather flip those, by the way. I would rather call this player data, and then the player individual information would be player info, but I didn't want to move too many wheels in this case. So let's just go ahead and refresh this node. Compile. Interesting. Oh yeah, there we go. That's cool. Compile and save. Okay, so we do our overlap. We can load game data. We'll have to update in the game instance. We get the player data, which gives us an out player data, and then this should also get updated so that we're consistent, so we don't confuse people. We're going to call this get player info. Okay, and if we go back, this will be called get player info, and rather than out player data, I want to, where'd that go? Get player info, out player info, just so it's not confusing, as if it isn't already. Compile and save. Okay, so everything's the same. We're getting our info, we're saving our info. Our BPI takes on save game info. Player info is the variable that passes in. Forgot to change that one. Compile and save. Go back, refresh this node by right-clicking, connect in player info again, compile and save. Okay, so now third-person character gets the player info and saves the game info. So then the blueprint interface passes the message, and then our game instance eventually is going to do all that stuff too. So let's refresh. Let's take this and refresh this. So that should get rid of everything. And then we need to change our event save game. So event save game, let's change all of this. Okay, and we're going to change this to be a player info struct instead. Okay, compile that. It doesn't know how to do it. It's going to be broken. So let's take and split this struct, break the struct. Now this struct now has the individual pieces that we need in it. So here's our player data, this is our weapon data, and this is our item data. When we compile that, holy smokes, it compiled, which is cool. Okay, so we have one more thing we need to connect. We need to connect our player info. We should rename that on our save game. Rather than player data, this is going to be our player info. Let's compile and save that. Now, why in the world did we go through all that? This is a cleaner way to work. Reason being is, it's almost like being able to pass in a single argument that is a single structure that is all of your arguments that you can then change. So when future me realizes that I also need, beyond my player data and weapon data and item data, I need my inventory data, for example, or I need stats, or I need movement speed, whatever else it is, I don't have to go back, and everything you just saw me change, I don't have to go back and change. I can literally just go update the player struct or the player info struct, and I don't have to go rewrite all my functions. I don't have to go rewrite all those things. Now what will happen is in my save game, there'll just be another field. In fact, we can do it right now just for kicks. Compile and save, struct player info. Let's just say that we wanted to add a new variable to this, and this is going to be inventory data, inventory items. I'm just going to do something random so we don't break anything, and this is just going to be an array of strings, for example. When I save this, if we go back to our JSON live, you'll notice that now I just have these inventory items. I can just do what I want to with them. I don't have to go back and rewire all of my functions. So it's worth calling that out. Now, of course, the trick here is, did that actually work? So let's go to our weapons and let's make a couple changes to our weapons here. And let's do a scythe, which I can't spell, whatever, that's fine. And let's do longbow. And then let's do size. Okay. And then in our items, we're going to do boots of defense. And we'll do a health crystal to go with it. And we'll do, what did we call it? Oh, we'll do a mana potion instead. We're doing all this because we want to make sure the file's actually different. So let's go compile, save, and let's see if we still work the way we should. So we'll walk over this one. That should theoretically have saved it. And we come back over it. You can see now in the top left, we have our name and everything is still the same. And we have a scythe, a longbow, a size. We have mana potions, health crystals, and boots of defense. So originally, you know what? It was kind of worth showing you that pain, I think, so that you all could see what exactly was going on and why these little decisions will have a massive effect. And every single person I have ever talked to who has gone through this save game data journey, it's important to understand they all come back with the same thing. They all come back with, I did it, I got it all working, and then I realized I needed one more float, or I needed one more variable, and then they had to restructure the entire data set because they realized by adding one single variable, they had inadvertently not set up their data structures in a way that was extendable. So, and a lot of times the question comes in, well, why does Unreal do this? Why don't they have it? Well, because every single game is going to have different requirements for the data structures. So that's why this rabbit hole was hopefully fun and or illuminating maybe. So as far as like the pain that's coming when you come into this, like this whole data structure thing is nuts. But even beyond the whole rabbit hole aspect of this, the other thing was figuring out the ability to stack these JSON objects and do that. I could find nothing that let me do it, and I literally just pounded away at it for, you know, extended periods of time until I just found something that works. So what did you all think? Dobre Vitsor. That is Bergus. Where are we coming in from? Because that's not... It's something Cyrillic based. I love studying foreign languages, you also. Well, that's great, Bart. Welcome. Also, did I see you hop in? I don't know if I saw you hop in. Welcome to the stream. The point is, though, this video will be here if you need it, and it's not necessarily about doing it with the JSON file so much as letting you see why these decisions are truly a rabbit hole. And for those of you who don't know the rabbit hole reference, it's a reference to Alice in Wonderland. When she goes down the rabbit hole, it's far deeper than she realized. All right. Well, if there aren't any questions, then we can go ahead and call it a wrap. We didn't have any blue screens of death today, which is great. I will go ahead and as always, I will go ahead and once the video finishes processing, I will try to get chapters back up in so that we can go ahead and do that. Depending on how long it takes me to get the next stream ready, we may or may not do a stream next week, just as a general heads up, you all. Some of the next sets of data structures require databases and things like that. I'm going to go ahead and ask the Patreon community, do you actually want to see how to set up a SQL database as part of that stream? Or do you just want to see the Unreal side of it? We'll see what everybody says and we'll go from there. As always, I hope everybody has an amazing rest of your Tuesday, because we're off schedule a little bit. And an amazing rest of your week. Thanks for being flexible on the times, and as always, for being the best part of this adventure. Probably would have never figured this stuff out if it hadn't been for you all's questions. So this has been a lot of fun. So I hope everybody, TV, thanks for hopping in. I hope everybody has a good rest of your day. Take it easy.